What does economic development mean? How can Indigenous peoples play a stronger role in the greater economy? Blockchain has an application due to its interoperability in addition to its immutable access. Once it's logged in the blockchain and verified, it exists there forever.
So, what's your name and what do you do?
My name is Edgard Cruz, and I'm a member of the Tahltan Nation, and I work for a company called Turtle Island Connection, which is consulting services primarily in technology integration, economic development, and Indigenous relations. And I also host a very great position on the Nationsfirst team, which is a blockchain technology company as well.
What's technology integration exactly?
So technology integration is how we integrate new digital solutions into pre-existing frameworks that may be kind of outdated in terms of how they're being accessed, how the information is being shared, and where it's being consolidated.
What are examples of that kind of technology?
So Nationsfirst is currently building a blockchain technology called Band Office Management System that is really about creating some transparency amongst stakeholders and community members to make more informed decisions.
People have heard the term blockchain as it relates to crypto. Why does blockchain have an application here?
Blockchain has an application due to its interoperability in addition to its immutable access. So it actually can't be altered, it can't be changed. Once it's logged in the blockchain and verified by the various smart contracts and protocols, then it can't be changed or altered, and so it exists there forever.
And I've heard, Edgar, you do some work in the mining development space. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So currently right now I'm on a project called the Spirit Rock Resources Critical Relationships, which is an Indigenous-led methodology for mining. And Turtle Island Connection's role in this project is developing a natural capital asset ledger that can be then used for tokenization, ecosystem management, as well as identifying some newer opportunities in biotechnology through reclamation and other activities.
Biotechnology in mining, how does that work?
Well, biotechnology in mining supports reclamation activities and the microbiome that's available and that exists within contaminated sites. There's a lot of potential for microbial organisms to clean those sites and even potentially generate oxygen, or to also extract some of the minerals and metals that are critical to British Columbia's industry and our economy.
Would you tell me a little bit about lessons you've learned working with other members of the Tahltan Nation in this space?
Absolutely. So first and foremost is the 1910 Declaration of the Tahltan Tribe. The principles and philosophy that I believe is embedded in there, right, is something I take with me everywhere to uphold and support our traditional rights as Indigenous peoples enshrined by Section 35. But also one of the greatest lessons I've learned is a worldview and a philosophical perspective symbolized by the word Istasihi Konalina, which means she and the land are one. And so it's kind of representative of that philosophy of interconnectedness. And that's the same philosophy we're looking to embed and implement within this new project with critical relationships and this Indigenous-led methodology in mining.
How did you get into this line of work?
So it's actually kind of a crazy story. I really began in off-reserve Indigenous governance and looking to build models of self-government for off-reserve Indigenous peoples. That kind of transformed into understanding and recognizing that in order to have any kind of government, you need a physical basis for that. So some money in order to supply decisions, inform programs, and other things that are made available to some of the citizenry. And economic development was one of those big pieces in the pie, which then kind of led me into a direction of that kind of exploration. And what does economic development mean when it's done in an Indigenous manner? And how can Indigenous peoples play a stronger role in the greater economy?
I think we're seeing in some other sectors, like energy export for one, where nations start out working with industry and then they progress to actually owning projects. How does that look like for mining? Because it is such a capital-intensive industry.
I think what that looks like for mining is definitely an evolving conversation, but we also see things like the Selkirk acquisition in the Yukon. So I think as Indigenous peoples continue to take more space in this, who knows what that could mean for extraction, for the economy, and leadership within this space, and how it evolves for the next however many generations.
Do you have any advice for young Indigenous people who are still figuring out what they want to do for their career?
My first recommendation is to get informed. Be informed, be accompanied by your community, your elders, learn from them as much as you can, engage with them. And the kind of capacity that I'm in here within my own company, right? It could be a little contentious at times in saying that, some folks may be like, this is the Tahltan representative. So also always make sure to be very clear of who you represent and when and where. You're always going to represent your nation, in many of these spaces that you're going to be in, but you're also representing yourself. So make sure you find a strong balance and coordinate effectively amongst your leadership and community.
Any thoughts on things that you wish people knew more about the work you do?
So I think the Future Minerals Leadership Council is a really amazing initiative out of Turtle Island Connection that's really dedicated to empowering Indigenous and non-Indigenous youth, particularly around leadership and dialogue. So how do we engage with government, First Nations, and industry to align some of our interests, advocate for some of the priorities that Indigenous and non-Indigenous youth have identified, and start to bring those kind of conversations to the table. I would really love for more people to become engaged with the youth today through the Future Minerals Leadership Council, potentially engaging us in various kind of projects or in different kind of roles to really begin shaping some of those leadership skills, as in the future we're going to be those key decision makers and economic drivers for the growth of Indigenous economies and the Canadian economy itself.
Are there any things you need from industry to make that initiative a success?
First, I need things from Indigenous peoples. We need the relationships, the respect, the protocol, and the reciprocal mechanisms that support our collective interests and rights as Indigenous peoples. Secondary to that is then working with industry, is to really come engage with us. We'll start to paint a picture of what's needed and how we may be able to support each other, and then we can begin to work together.
Thank you so much.